All right, thanks everybody for coming to Canna Advisors Virginia Cannabis 2026 Policy Outlook and Market Strategy. See, we have quite a few people joining us already, and we'll be letting people in from the lobby as they arrive. Um, Pardon any dings on my screen as people come in. My name is Summer Thomas, and I'm going to be talking us through the housekeeping items here, kind of as we just get started. First off, feel free, please, to ask questions as we go. Um, we'll get to them during the presentation, and if not, we'll circle back to those at the end. If anyone's questions don't get answered, we'll reach back out via email, or feel free to email either of us or reach out on the Canna Advisors contact page with any of your follow-up questions. You can email me directly. It's summer@thinkcanna.com. Note that's summer with one M, and always happy to answer any of the questions coming out of the webinar. We'll also have the recording of the webinar available afterwards on the Canna Advisors website. I think that'll be on our events page, so you can go back and watch this anytime at a later date if there's something that you miss. We are recording this on January 15th, so just to note, if you come back later to watch this, this information is going to be current as of January 15, 2026. We also have a free consultation and a free checklist available for any new businesses interested in joining the Virginia market. You can reach out to either of us or to Canna Advisors contact page, and we'll get you set up with that free consultation and free checklist. All right, so let's just get started with a brief intro to Canna Advisors. If you signed up for this webinar, there's a good chance you've already heard of us. Canna Advisors has been around for 13 years now. We've worked in 40 states and territories across the United States. We've been leading the charge into new cannabis markets since 2013. As one of the industry's most trusted cannabis consultancies, we guide entrepreneurs, startups, and established cannabis businesses into new markets across the country, whether you're brand new to cannabis and you're just wanting to learn more, or if you're an existing business looking to grow or expand your footprint, we're here to help out there. I will bob to our next slide here. There you go. Green's all the coverage of Canna Advisors nationwide. So as you can see, we've had a lot of experience throughout the country. We still can't predict the future when it comes to new cannabis markets, but from all of this experience, we do have a lot of expertise and can help guide your planning as this Virginia market opens. As I mentioned, my name is Summer Thomas. I'm joined today by Dalton Valette, our Senior Project Manager. Thanks so much, Dalton, for joining us. Let me give just a bit on my background. My role here, as you can see, is Vice President of Regulatory Operations. I oversee all of our consulting services. I'm an attorney by education, not your lawyer, so no legal advice here today. But I've worked in dozens of states across the country, help cannabis businesses form their initial business and financial strategies, win licenses, and launch, always with an eye on compliance and getting started as efficiently as possible. Dalton, do you want to give a bit on your background?
Happy to do so. Thank you all again so much for attending. As Summer mentioned, my name is Dalton Valette. I'm a senior project manager here at Canna Advisors. I've been in the industry nearly half a decade now, working in a number of different states across the country, helping businesses with their financial modeling, business planning, and license pursuits. Prior to joining Canna, I worked in a number of different industries such as data privacy, digital advertising, and healthcare. And since joining Canna, it's been an absolute pleasure being able to work in a lot of new and upcoming markets now, like Virginia, which is gearing up to have their adult use market roll out. And similarly, if you have any sort of questions, comments, or clarifications, you're more than welcome to reach out to me at dalton@thinkcanna.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dalton. It's wonderful to have you here. Dalton is our resident political guru. He always knows what's going on in every new state and helps us, just navigate all of the different quirks that come up in legislative and regulatory action. So great to have him chatting with us today. For today's session, objectives listed here, we're going to go over the Virginia cannabis policies and legislative updates, also give you an eye into what is coming down the pipe for regulatory action. We'll take a deep dive into licensing, let you know everything we know about the licensing process right now, what we're going to see transpire in the next few months, and then how operators and investors can position themselves now, as well as some common pitfalls and mistakes we've maybe seen in other states that can help out here in Virginia.
All
All
right,
right,
so I
hand
think
off
I
to
can
you,
take it from
Dalton.
here. Thank you very much, Summer. I'll cover the next couple of slides here. So we have a lot of details in Virginia right now when it comes to this specific timeline. The great thing is, earlier this week, we actually received legislation which further solidified the timeline that we're going to be looking at in the Commonwealth here. So the very first step that needs to happen is this bill was recently just introduced into the House of Representatives, HB 602. And after we get this bill through all of its committees, through the Senate, and then onto incoming Governor Abigail Spanberger's desk, then that bill will actually become law. The timeline that is detailed within the law itself is anticipating that the Cannabis Control Authority, or the CCA, is going to begin accepting applications for certain business types as soon as July 1st of 2026. Now, there are a lot of different business types that are going to be offered licenses. We don't know the specific types of licenses that are going to be offered come July 1st, but we have some good estimations. We have some good guesses. I would personally not be surprised if some of these include impact licensees or micro businesses, cultivators, processors, and potentially additional retail dispensary licenses, but we'll dive into a little bit more on that later. With this timeline in place, come September 1st, this is when the certain license types are going to actually be issued. So this would mean there'd be a period of time where you'd be able to submit all of the necessary application materials. Then the CCA will actually be reviewing these documents, making sure individuals are qualified and meet all the regulatory standards to be awarded a license. And come September 1st, licenses should begin to be issued to those individuals and to those respective businesses, with an eye towards roughly November of this year being when retail sales are going to actually be commencing on a Commonwealth basis. Now, I will say this is a fairly expeditious timeline. We've worked in a number of different states that have had a process that's gone on for many, many, many years. One of the states that we spent a great deal of time in is New York, and they still have individuals who have submitted application materials all the way back in 2023 who are waiting to hear from the state. So Virginia trying to work this in from July 1st to November of this year is a very fast timeline and indicates, one, that the governing body is more than eager and anticipated to get things moving and wants to get these shops open and running. And two, there is going to be a lot of work that applicants are going to need to do, especially in these early days, to make sure that they're prepared, because with a timeline like this, there's a lot of different pitfalls that people can fall into because there's just so many fast moving parts. Next slide. So as we see, there are some key legislative updates. We just had House Bill 642 that was formally introduced this Tuesday. That was kind of the jumpstart for things really into this program. We have the Joint Commission to oversee the transition of the Commonwealth into a cannabis retail market. Talk about a mouthful for a joint committee. They are going to be the ones who are helping to move this marketplace from its current medical status into an adult use retail marketplace. They met in December and gave some proposed updates and changes to previous iterations of legislation that had come through and had been actually vetoed. But now they're in a much stronger position to see these proposals adopted. Governor Abigail Spanberger is going to be sworn in this Saturday, and she has indicated that she is going to sign legislation to create this adult use market. So that's why, compared to in years past, we're very excited and eager to get Virginia off the ground and running, and are optimistic about what the end of this year is going to really be bringing and shaping Virginia into. Next slide. So as we're looking at some of these regulatory trends, there's a couple of things that individuals should be mindful of. First, if you haven't attended any of the CCA Board of Directors meetings, highly recommend you doing so. They all are available online. You can Zoom in if you would like. The next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, February 17th at 1 p.m. I highly recommend individuals try to tune into those. At a bare minimum, check some of the agendas and some of the meeting notes. They are all available online. Compared with a lot of other states and their regulatory governing bodies, Virginia has made accessing this information fairly easy. There are some states that tend to kind of bury this information, and you have to kind of be a sleuth to actually identify what you really are trying to search for. Virginia has made this relatively easy to find, so definitely want to check that out. And the important thing, too, that we have in Virginia is the CCA has spent the last year basically building out the regulatory and operational infrastructure in Virginia, ready for the adult use marketplace. There's a lot of kind of unique quirks with Virginia and this overall rollout itself, given what voters had decided years previously, and then roadblocks associated with governor vetoes. So Virginia is having a very kind of aggressive timeline in place, but it does seem, in our eyes, possible to actually do this, given the amount of kind of work that's already been put into getting this program off the ground and running. And one of the things to bear in mind is we do have kind of the standard regulatory process, which can take anywhere from 18 to 24 months when it comes to actually really kind of seeing the tangible impacts of a law becoming a law or when it actually takes effect. And we also have emergency regulatory processes. I would not be surprised if, as we get closer to when these licenses are going to be issued or when the application period is going to come around, we're introduced through the CCA more emergency regulations. This means that the regulations could also be temporary, and then they have to be renewed on a maybe 6 months or an annual basis. But this kind of makes sure that the process continues to run smoothly and at a much more expeditious pace than we would typically see with the standard regulatory process. Another thing to note too is the CCA board has recently expanded from 5 to 7 members. This was intended to strengthen the overall oversight capacity and to increase efficiency as the program itself scales up and rolls out too, because Virginia does have its medical market right now, but it is going to be a completely different beast once the adult use market opens up. And as we see hundreds of new businesses really start their own operations this year and into next year. And I'll pass it over to Summer.
All right, great. Thanks, Dalton. Good background there on the legislative and regulatory process. So now let's dig into what we know about the license structure, types, and allocations right now. Most of this is new information from the bill. You'll see as a common theme throughout our presentation today that the CCA board is going to have a lot on their plate, a lot of decisions still to make about how this program is going to be structured and what we can expect in the coming months from the license application period. That CCA board is going to establish the license application requirements, what the license application process is going to be, how they're approving those licenses and what the timeline there will be, and then what the overall oversight framework might look like for getting your business from licensure to actual launch or opening your doors, and then going forward with compliant oversight from the CCA. The license types that we know about right now: cultivation, processing, retail stores, micro businesses, delivery, transport, testing, and then dual use, which will be the medical and adult use combined license for those pharmaceutical processors that currently exist. Right now, the limits on number of licenses, the retail marijuana stores are currently limited to 350. And then Tier 5 marijuana cultivation facilities are limited to 5. Other than that, the bill does not identify limits on the other license types, and it's going to be left to the CCA to determine what those limits are. So, this may be a time for advocacy, certainly attending those CCA meetings like Dalton mentioned, to just make sure that you're apprised of what's going on. If you have an opportunity for public comment, I would just encourage everyone to be as involved as possible at this point, as the CCA is creating the rules that the whole market is going to be abiding by over the coming months and years. There was also no mention of a cap on micro business licenses in the bill at this point, though they had previously mentioned 100 micro business licenses, at least in the first tranche of micro business licenses to be awarded. Again, for size limitations, a lot has been left up to the board. Tier 5 marijuana cultivation facilities can be up to 35,000 square feet. And then the canopy for tiers 1 through 4 have to be lower than 35,000, but those again are going to be up to the board to determine. I always like to throw out the definition of canopy. This seems to be a sticking point that folks are often confused about. There is a definition for canopy in the bill. It's going to include only your flowering plants, not your immature plants. And then will count each level or layer. So if you have a sort of stacked system where you have 2 or 3 layers of plants, each of those levels is going to count towards your total square footage. And then one other size limitation is on retailers. Retailers can have up to 2,500 square feet of retail store floor space. So just want to make sure to make that distinction. That's your retail floor space. It doesn't seem to be that that's going to be the limit for your entire facility. So that should be ample room for most retailers to have a retail floor that fits under that 2,500 square foot limit. All right, and then a sub-license type here that we haven't talked about, we'll start off with first, is the impact licensee. That's going to be a sort of a separate classification that your business may qualify for. There are certain benefits and then, potentially some drawbacks as well to getting that impact license. That had formerly been known as the social equity license. They just changed the terminology here in Virginia to call that an impact license. So some things that some benefits you'll get is a preference in the licensing process, percentage of the application or license fee waived, access to low interest business loan program, and then a waiver of any requirements to show proof of funds or current possession and control of the licensed premises at the time of the initial application. One potential drawback there is that there is a 5-year ban on transferring more than 49% of that impact license. So if you're looking to get the license and start it up and maybe sell it within the first 5 years, then maybe being an impact licensee isn't quite right for you. So some other things we know about the application requirements right now. And we'll get, like I said, a lot more information on this once the CCA board has released regulations. First is finances. Almost always applications are requesting some information about your finances, whether it's just showing that you've paid all of your taxes on time, that you can demonstrate sufficient financial responsibility, which is what it states in the bill. or that you show your proof of funds in the application. As I mentioned, an impact licensee would not have to show that proof of funds at the initial time of the application, but it may allude to other potential applicants having to disclose that proof of funds. Generally, proof of funds, is going to be an underlying commitment letter, bank statements, other proof that the business has the funding that it needs to start. That may also hinge on some sort of a financial model, just to show how you've arrived at that capital requirement. And we'll talk more about financial models here in a few minutes. Another thing that we know is that the location in the application, for impact licensees, again, they're not going to have to show control of that proposed license premises at the time of application. The bill also states that other applicants may not have to show their proposed premises until later on in the application process. So that alludes to there being multiple parts to the application itself. So we may have, an initial application where you're putting in some more basic information, and then maybe a part 2 or part 3 of the process where you're then submitting your proposed location details, maybe your floor plans and security overlay and things like that may come at a later date. The bill also lays out that the board is going to provide forms for the application. So that helps give a little bit more certainty to the application process. We'll know exactly what the questions are, the exact information that the board is expecting applicants to supply. Sometimes that's a blessing and a curse. As Dalton knows, in other states, we've had forms that can be a little tricky to use if you're having to fill in, PDFs that are character or word limited, or that sort of thing. But we'll always, figure out a way to make the forms work in the most efficient way possible. And then lastly, the bill states that a labor peace agreement will be required for initial applicants. So that will take working with a local labor union, which we always find a good connection there to a trustworthy local union to help put together that labor peace agreement, and then have evidence of that for the application itself. And then a bit more on that impact licensee. I'm sure many of you are wondering what those exact requirements are to become an impact licensee. First, to note that at least 66% of the ownership and direct control of the applicant business has to fit into these criteria. And they need to meet at least 4 out of the following 7 criteria, which I don't think we've ever seen in another state that they require you to meet 4 of the criteria. Usually you just have to meet the ownership percent standard there, and then at least, one of the criteria, and you may be able to mix and match different ones. So this is a little bit out of the ordinary that you have to have 4 of the criteria. So first, convicted or adjudicated of a violation that relates to marijuana. And then second, if you're a parent, child, sibling, or spouse of someone who has been convicted of the same or adjudicated delinquent of that marijuana-related violation. If you've resided between 2011 and 2025 in a jurisdiction that's disproportionately policed for marijuana crimes, or at least 3 of the past 5 years in a historically economically disadvantaged community. And that term is defined within the bill itself. Number 4, attended at least 5 years at a public elementary or secondary school located in a historically economically disadvantaged community. That's a mouthful. Number 5, received a federal Pell Grant or attended at least 2 years at a college or university at which 30% of the students are eligible for a Pell Grant. Number 6, veterans of the armed forces. And then number 7, have qualified for financial assistance or relief from the Department of Agriculture as a distressed farmer in the last 5 years. So if you're planning to apply under the impact licensee requirements, I would just get familiar with these as you're putting together your team, be keeping these in mind. And then of course, just double checking that anyone on your team does qualify there. All right, with that, I'll pass it over to Dalton to get into some more details on real estate.
Thank you very much, Summer. So, real estate and local zoning considerations, in our experience, tend to be one of the biggest, if not the single largest barrier to entry that individuals or applicants have when it comes to securing a cannabis license. The good thing that we're already seeing in Virginia is that the Commonwealth government seems very aware of this, and has very expressly stated that there is going to be no local opt-outs for allowing cannabis operations within boundaries. I think a lot of people are actually surprised with the sheer number of states that have very stringent uh, local requirements, and a lot of states, even like California, have around 40% of their municipalities opt out of allowing cannabis businesses in their marketplace. Even though states like California are very mature marketplaces, we're still, because of the sheer number of counties that have opted out or have very onerous restrictions in place at a local level, we're still seeing municipalities just start to open up to allow, let's say, dispensary operations in their boundaries. So this is not an issue that we're going to see in Virginia, thankfully. However, we have seen a number of municipalities over the years be very tricky. And really, if they have, like, let's say their planning commission or their planning board or the local government has personal animosity towards allowing cannabis businesses to open and operate, they can put in a lot of other stringent requirements. So if you have a storefront or you have a property in mind right now that you're interested in using for any sort of cannabis operation, now is a good time to start reaching out to municipality governments or town staff and seeing what kind of the feel is. Since we just got the bill this week, there's likely very little in the way of local ordinances in place or local regulations about cannabis operations, especially on the adult use side of things. But that is going to be changing. We will see regulations come in at a local level, and you don't want to be in a position where you have an ideal property. It's a wonderful location, great foot traffic, can make a lot of money on a retail floor area, but the municipal government has all these different zoning requirements that will make it impossible for you to actually open up a location there. So just be mindful of that. One of the things that we were very interested in seeing with this bill too was what the distance requirements between dispensaries was going to be. In some of the earlier conversations with that joint commission that we mentioned earlier, there was talk of having distance requirements as far as 1 mile apart. So that would mean 1 mile from every dispensary. You couldn't have a dispensary anywhere closer from a mile. And there was even talk that municipalities could extend that further if they wanted to. That has been changed within the current bill, and that distance requirement is now 1,000 feet. So if you become, let's say, a dispensary owner and operator, you will know that there are not going to be dispensaries within 1,000 feet of you. However, because there is actually some flexibility at a local level, local municipalities can shrink that if they want to. So again, this is something, if you have a property in mind, if you know a city or a town that you want to be operating out of, pay attention to what is going on at a local level, because we oftentimes see people get a license from the state or the Commonwealth government, but then run into issues when it comes to property and what's going on at a local level. And we do also have some specific requirements that we often see at a local level when it comes to hours of operation. This is very typical for dispensary operations where certain hours are restricted, or maybe even certain days of operating business. That can happen too. The manner of operations too. Every municipality can be very unique. We've seen this a lot actually when it comes to cultivation. Sometimes different municipalities will say the zoning for cultivation, especially if it varies from indoor or outdoor grows, could be listed or zoned as agriculture, where in other municipalities, maybe even the next county over, it could be light industrial. That's something that we see a lot. So again, when it comes to the property search, when it comes to identifying what you want to do with your license type, be aware of what is going on, be aware of the zoning requirements too, because you'll really want to make sure you're crossing those T's, dotting those I's, making sure everything lines up accordingly. Because the worst scenario would be you go through the onerous process of getting an application and getting that license from the board of directors, and then you ultimately can't open your shop because of some very nuisance issues related to local governance. So always be mindful. That's one of the things that we try to prioritize with clients that we're working with. And often we will work with or coordinate or communicate with local governments too to see what they're doing on our clients' behalf, just to be aware and keep clients in the loop about best practices moving forward. And next slide. I think I can pass it off to Summer to go over some pre-application pitfalls that we see.
Great, thanks, Dalton. Good stuff on real estate there. Was very happy to see that they changed the distance requirement to 1,000 feet instead of a mile. I don't know if I'd ever heard immediate jeering before at a legislative meeting, but they had to actually bang the gavel to restore order at that joint commission meeting. When they said a mile, everyone was like, oh, heck no, that can't work. So great to see that they, I would say, took the advice of others that had joined the meeting and interested parties there to decrease that distance requirement. All right, so let's talk about some pre-application pitfalls and preparation. One of the first things that, I think just sometimes people get too excited about putting together their new business and they want to just sprint into getting ready for the application. Before that, it's important that you put together your business plan and your overall strategy. Getting a good idea of your overarching vision and aligning the interests of everybody on the team can make it a lot easier going forward to make those critical business decisions. Sometimes they need to be made, in a snap. It's just good to know that everyone on the team is on the same page, that we all agree on the same business plan, that we have similar goals for the business going forward. That can just make everything move in a much more streamlined manner, especially as Dalton's saying, there may just be a few months to get these applications put together. You don't want to go into that first day of planning for your application or writing your application and still not know exactly what license type you want to go after, not know exactly what size business you're trying to open. You also want to have a good idea of what your market plan is, how you're going to bring your products to market. If you're going to be a micro business and only operate within, create your own products and sell your own products, or whether you want another standalone license type, or if you want to be a vertical license, which is allowed here, that you could have 3 different license types yourself. So it's just good to have already had those conversations with your team. And we here at CanAdvisors can also help with that planning, just to sort of talk through the pros and cons of different license types, either one or multiple or micros or impact licenses, to just have a better idea of what direction you're heading in. Another thing that's important is your unique value proposition, which can be a little bit, a little different in cannabis than other markets, right? If you're opening up some common business and you're trying to disrupt the dry cleaning business, you're probably going to have some new ideas, as that's a very established space. With cannabis, sometimes a unique value proposition can just be being the most buttoned up, the most compliant, having the best plans and execution strategy for your future. So, you don't have to necessarily say, oh, we're going to deliver via drone or something like that. That might be a little bit too unique for these regulators, right? They want to just see that you have a very responsible and well laid out business plan there. Another thing we mentioned before was your proof of funds for the application. Normally that requires some kind of financial modeling or pro forma generation. That can be for the application purposes, and then also crucially for investors. Banks often want to see that you have a financial pro forma put together. Same with your local government. And then just for your own internal team planning and feasibility. Having a financial model can make all the difference, right? When you're deciding how big of a business that you want to roll out, what your capital needs are going to be, what your capital raise target might be, um, your investor returns and things like that, that you really need kind of from the get-go in that capital management to understand your business itself. Other things you might see in your financial model, your cash flow timing, your burn rate analysis, sort of overarching expenses like your furniture, fixtures, and equipment, your other operating expenses. You can also look at your unit economics, so the pricing of your individual products, purchasing, sales of those, average basket sizes all come in. And those may all just have different effects on your business decisions and planning moving forward. Another thing to note is team building. That's a critical pitfall that we see. Of course, you're going to need a lot of people for your cannabis business, but you don't necessarily need everyone on day one. So just understanding your org chart, hiring cadence, right? Who do you need and when do you need to bring each of those parties into the fold? Some of this may be led by what's required in the application. It may be required by who's on your initial founding team. Um, you may not have operational experience already on your founding team. So you may need to go out and hire somebody who specifically is a director of cultivation type role or something like that, to have them for the application and for your initial build out, just to give you that expertise on the team. I would say one kind of pitfall we sometimes see is just building too big of a team too quickly, especially at the top of your org chart. You don't necessarily need 15 people in the C-suite right as you get going. As they say, could be too many cooks in the kitchen for that. And just keeping some balance between, the operational roles, the business management roles, compliance related roles, to make sure that we're covering all of the important buckets, but not oversaturating in any one place. As we mentioned, those impact qualifications also come into team building. If you're trying to qualify as an impact licensee, you just want to make sure that you're hitting that 66% threshold for ownership and control. And that can often, take some finagling, some negotiations. You want to have your local attorneys involved in building out a team that might qualify there for the impact licensee, and just making sure that you're not running afoul of any of those requirements. Oftentimes it takes more time than you think to determine if somebody qualifies as an impact licensee, right? You may be looking at years of residential history. You might be looking at criminal records and needing maybe even a separate attorney to go through your criminal record to make sure that it qualifies under the specific requirements given in the bill. So a lot of things to think about when it comes to team building. And then outside of your core team, you also want to make sure that you have vendors in place as necessary. So for example, like I said, lawyers, cannabis-specific accountants, maybe design or security specialists for putting together floor plans, consultants, license application writers as well, to make sure that you're moving through the license application process efficiently. And then lastly here, I mentioned a checklist here that Canna Advisors is going to provide. If you reach out to us for a free consult, we'll provide you with a checklist just to help, understand all these different points for business planning, for financial modeling, for team building, and tons of other things that you need to think about as you're getting ready for your application, and then preparing for your business to launch compliantly and efficiently. So, all right. Oh, I will add one more pitfall just that we always see is when it comes to starting your business, there are almost always unrealistic financial predictions being thrown around. So financial modeling is just kind of crucial in really understanding what your expenses are going to be. And if those expenses, the expense predictions are unrealistic from the get-go, it can just kind of affect every other part of your planning, of your team, of your facility. All of these points are just tied together. So that's sort of the foundational bedrock of getting an understanding of all the different moving parts of the business. So that is one pitfall that we often see.
And when we're looking at investors and operating itself, one of the most important things is to assess when are you going to actually be entering the marketplace? Because there are a lot of different key points in launching any sort of business, but in particular with cannabis, that you want to be mindful of. You want to make sure, I would argue, that you capitalize on the first mover advantage. You really want to make sure that you are the most sophisticated, tailored individual or business team that are going to be moving forward and that you are going to be compliant in this industry. So it's important when it comes to business planning itself to make sure that all the steps that you're doing are going to be aligning with the licensing windows, with a realistic launch plan as well, and with notifications that you're going to be receiving from various governing and licensing entities and bodies too. It's really good, I think, to work kind of backwards with a timeline like this. So if you're really adamant and certain that as a, let's say, licensed dispensary, you're going to start sales the very first week of November, as it does seem the Commonwealth is interested in having happen, you'd work backwards from there to see what are the things that you should be doing 3 months before that, 6 months before that, 10 months before that, because before you know it, that will be here. It might seem like a long period of time right now between now and November when sales are supposed to launch, but in the scheme of things and in the cannabis world in particular, this is actually a very short period of time. So you really want to make sure that you're doing those necessary steps now in order to make sure that your business is actually going to be able to seize the moment. A lot of people jump into the licensing and application process way too late into the cycle. If you are still trying to scramble together a team the week that the application window is going to be closing, you're still looking for property, it might be a very, very, very uphill battle, if not completely impossible to actually achieve this. And that also ties in with any sort of fundraising or any sort of capital deployment that you're looking for. As Summer had mentioned a little bit earlier too, there is the importance of financial modeling. And one of the things that you can look at in a very good and robust financial model is how much are the expenses going to be and where are these funds going to be coming from? Are you going to be self-financing this venture on your own or maybe with a couple of friends or business partners? Or are you going to need to go out and look for potential loan opportunities? Or are you going to look for, let's say, guardian investors? This is what's really important when it comes to timing to make sure that you have enough room in your schedule to actually accommodate for this moving forward. Because loans might take a little bit longer than anticipated. Signing a new investor might take a little bit longer as well. And you want to make sure that you're in a reasonable financial position moving forward to actualize this maybe vision that you have for your business operations. So again, make sure that you're planning ahead of time. Now is actually the good time to really start to iron out and begin looking at details on financial feasibility of a cannabis business in Virginia. And again, as I had talked about previously, there are the local government evaluations too. So in your municipality, there likely is not that much in the way of cannabis regulations or cannabis guidance. It very well might not even be a thought in some town staffers' minds, but that will change. They will be very aware of once the state actually moves, once the bill is signed, on what some of these requirements are depending on the municipality too. If you're in a very suburban cosmopolitan area such as Richmond, you could have a flood of potential applicants trying to get in to secure a property, secure a location, and maybe even secure local approval in this process. You'll want to make sure that one, you're aware of everything that's going on in the municipality, and two, of any sort of delays that could happen associated with this. Because the Commonwealth and the CCA has a very set plan and set timeline in place to get these sales off the ground and running. That doesn't necessarily translate to every single municipality is going to be on the same wavelength as them. When it comes to some of the more rural areas too, they might have very limited town staff available to actually accommodate for this. You could reach out and you might be the very first person that's bringing this issue to their attention. We've seen that time and time again, actually, in a lot of these more rural, less populated areas in different states. So just be mindful of that and be mindful that when it comes to some municipalities, things can move a little bit slower than we might want them to. So work that into your scheduling, give yourself some buffer space as well. And again, that's where it's really beneficial to kind of look at the anticipated launch or operational date of your business, work backwards from there, and see how you can operate with the timelines that we're aware of right now, and add in that buffer zone for any sort of delays that could pop up on your search for a loan, investor, or any sort of headaches at a local level that could emerge as well. And next slide.
Right. Thanks, Dalton. All right. With that, I think we can open it up to questions. I did realize a couple other things that I wanted to mention. One is the definition of micro business. So the micro business is going to be able to cultivate, process, and retail their own cultivated or processed products. The canopy limit is going to be 5,000 square feet for indoor or 10,000 square feet for outdoor. Unique to the micro business, they will not be able to hold any other license, just the micro business, and they can only operate on one premise. So I meant to say that back in the licensing deep dive. I wanted to make sure everyone knew that about the micro business, as that's usually a fairly popular license type that we see for new entrants. I did mention as well that verticality, or owning the cultivation, processing, and retail licenses will be allowed. One thing to note for ownership, they define an ownership interest as having 10% or more of ownership, voting power, or economic value in the business. So just keeping that in mind when you're putting together your team, that you don't want anybody that is disqualifying you from owning too many businesses. So you can own a single person can have an interest in no more than 5 total licenses, not including transporter. But you can only have one tier 5 cultivation license. So that's a cultivation license that can have up to 35,000 square feet. You'd only be able to have one of those. And then, like I said, if you have a micro business license, you could just have one of those. And it looks like we have a question here from Darwin. So I'm trying to start a retail dispensary and lounge. I know you mentioned only having a building of 2,500 square feet, but what does it look like with having a smoking lounge? That is a good question. What the specific bill says there is 2,500 square feet for your retail sales floor. So I think as long as the sales floor itself is within that restriction, you would be open to have a larger overall footprint for the business. So, you could have additional space for your back of house, for a lobby, for things like that, that would be outside of that 2,500 square feet. So I don't think it would probably restrict you too much there.
And I also saw in the Q&A section from Thomas, are there lawsuit concerns that may delay licensing rollouts, i.e. temporary injunctions, etc., based on what you're seeing with this legislation? There's always the risk of litigation. There are litigations and lawsuits that occur probably in more states than not. Nothing in reading this text immediately caused me to think, oh, we're going to get a lawsuit based on this. which was a relief. There have been times where we've been reviewing documents and statutes, and we thought, yep, this is just ripe for litigation. I think New York was a perfect example of it. It was just a perfect storm that opened the floodgates for litigation. I don't think any state has been sued more than the OCM in New York. Minnesota was kind of a close second, though. There was quite a bit of litigation in Minnesota, too. But right now, I would say there are risks with litigation that's going to happen and potentially delay the process, too. I'd say kind of maybe factor that in. But there wasn't immediately anything that screamed out, yes, litigation is imminent.
Yeah, yeah, not as many red flags as we see in other jurisdictions. They stayed away from any straightforward residency requirements. They even allow your criminal convictions to be in another jurisdiction. So they've paid attention to things that have gotten other states in trouble there. Let's see, we have some other questions here. Jeff says, what is a good pre-licensure budget for design, legal, consultation, application? What have you seen for proof of funds and liquidity requirements in similar states? Let's see, for your pre-licensure budget, that will, that will be guided a lot by what the CCA board puts out on the actual license application requirements. If it's a very straightforward initial application that's maybe a lottery, that would be on the lower end of things. We've seen applications like those in Texas that are a merit-based application that require, hundreds or thousands of pages of application specifics, business specifics, and that could run you, so it could be really anywhere from maybe $30,000 to $50,000 all the way up to $300,000 to $500,000, just depending on the scope of the application itself. And then also it depends on how prepared you want to be for the next stage. Like Dalton said, if you're really dead set on being first to market and being open in November, there are going to be things that you want to push towards the start of your preparation timeline. And you may want to purchase a property. You may want to start build out on your property or things like that if you're really set on being first to market. If you want to be a bit more conservative, you may wait to have to find a property later on, and that's going to lessen your initial outlay of capital. Also, of course, the scale of your business, right? Are you trying to open a full vertical? That's going to be much different than just trying to open, say, one retail location or to just secure a transport license.
And then I see another question from Yin. Do you have any insight on the license selection process? Do you expect it to be a points-based system or a qualified lottery? So in states across the board, we see a variety of different kind of application processes. Some states have purely a lottery-based system where it really is just luck of the draw and if you get your application selected to be awarded a license. Or in other states or territories, you actually get points based on the quality of the materials that you submit and the overall quality of the application and basically the likelihood to succeed as a business moving forward. We tend to prefer the points-based system because it does award those individuals who are able to actually meet all the requirements. And a lot of times lottery winners might have just submitted a haphazard application on a lark and actually don't have any intention of owning or operating their business. And the license ends up just kind of collecting dust potentially. That's something we don't like to see. Based on the information that we have right now, I would say we're hewing closer to the side of maybe some kind of qualified lottery perspective. There's going to be qualifications no matter what. I think the detail that we saw within this right now is indicating that there is going to be qualifications. You are going to need to submit materials that meet muster. You can't just kind of haphazard this pursuit in general from what it seems like. I would have liked personally a little bit more detail available here. I think the MO with this bill was basically we're going to kick the can over to the CCA itself, and they will have to design the process and design the actual application requirements too, and if there's going to be points or if there's going to be a qualified lottery. We've seen more qualified lotteries in recent years. Uh, I would probably hedge my bets towards that, but I would love to see a points-based system personally. And if I were giving public comment, that's the route that I would urge the CCA to actually consider because I think you'll get the most qualified applicants overall and actually create a more reliable base of operations too with these initial tranche of application winners too.
Yep, agreed. And then Jeff, I realize I missed the second part of your question here. You said, what have you seen for proof of funds or liquidity requirements in similar states? Proof of funds can look a few different ways. Sometimes we'll see a state require some sort of a bond just to ensure compliance. If you have an infraction or something, they can turn to that bond. We've also seen a set dollar amount for different license types. Usually they're on the lower side of the required capital that you would need to show for the business. I would say the most often, though, we see more of a subjective um, approach where they want to know what license type are you pursuing? What does your pro forma look like? What are the different variables in your business? What's your business size? What other parameters have you set out for your business? So then that helps you arrive at what is the capital actually required for your actual business. So you may say, okay, my business is going to require $1 million to be opened. Here's the evidence of that in my pro forma. Then the state is going to want to see that you have at least $1 million, ideally over that amount, so that you have some cushion to work back from, right? Oh, maybe you accidentally undershot it, or you forgot a few expenses, or inflation or prices go up. So maybe if your pro forma shows that you need $1 million, then maybe you'd be safer to have $2 or $3 million available from investors. And then they could require that to be in a bank account, or they in the name of the business, or they may just require some sort of a letter of commitment from investors saying, yes, I'm open to committing up to $1 million or whatever towards this business. And here's my underlying bank account in my own personal name that shows that amount is available. So those are it's kind of the range that we normally see from states when it comes to proof of funds, and then how you would address that in your application.
And I see another question from Darwin. So how would working with you guys look like when starting the process and getting through the checklist? Would it just be paying for consultations, or how does a partnership might look like moving forward? So I'm not an attorney. I'm not your attorney. This is not to be misconstrued as legal advice, but it depends. A very lawyery response, I feel. It really does depend on kind of what you're interested or looking at. Maybe you start with a financial model, just to get a base of understanding on what the expenses and what the potential revenue and profit is going to be from your business. And then that evolves into a larger business plan, which incorporates elements into from the financial model into the business plan to maybe present to investors or maybe to the state. We tailor business plans based on kind of the intended audience for that. And then it can go into an application or a license pursuit where we review all of the materials that are necessary for submitting the application, have maybe regularly scheduled calls to gather information from that, and then make sure that you're ready and good to submit. We review all the documents alongside you to make sure that you're submitting all the documents needed to submit like a well-qualified application, and then guide you through that process too. Or maybe you just need a one-off check-in call, and that can work as well for you. But we do really kind of tailor it, and there's usually some kind of what we call deliverable at the end of it, be it a tranche of standard operating procedures, SOPs, or a financial model or a business plan, or all the materials necessary as part of the application process itself.
Great. Thanks, Dalton. All right. We're getting near the end on time here, just about a minute left. We can speak through a couple more questions here. And then anyone we don't get to, please shoot us an email. And we're happy, like I said, to have a free consult and to share that initial checklist just to get you started in the right path when it comes to starting your business here in Virginia. Yin Lin asks, is a lease going to be required as part of the application? The bill itself says that nothing in the subdivision shall be construed to require an applicant to have secured a place or premises until the final stage of the license application process. So inferring from that there may be a multi-stage application process. In the initial application, you may not have to submit your lease, though it may behoove you to do so if it is based on points or if you're trying to be first to market. It just may be helpful for you to already have your location selected so that you're not competing with others after the license award to get the best, most viable location.
Then I saw
Yeah.
a question from Matt. Do you expect to see a qualified lottery that's regionally based, awards by region? We haven't gotten any indication of that from this bill or from the CCA just yet, but Virginia right now on the medical side of things does have the Commonwealth broken up into specific regions. We have seen this approach done in neighboring states like Kentucky too when it came to awarding their medical licenses. So I personally wouldn't be too surprised if we do get that, if we do see maybe certain points awarded or certain number of licenses issued per region to kind of have a more evenly distributed marketplace.
Great. And then let's see, we'll get one more question here from Trey. Are there any other distance requirements, schools, playgrounds, etc.? And yes, so any sensitive uses, such as those, there's a list in the bill, is that same 1,000-foot restriction. And then there's not a distance restriction, but there is some sort of um, I don't know if it's a restriction, but a residential or residence area that has to be taken into account as well. So you might not be able to just, plop your retailer right in the middle of a subdivision or something like that. Um, all right. And then we don't know of any time limit. Last question from Jeff here. We don't know of any time limits after the award to be operational. I didn't see anything about that I recall in the bill, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like that comes out in the regulations. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Really appreciated all of your thoughtful questions. Hopefully, we were able to answer those for you. Please feel free to reach out to us if any other questions come up. And as it says here on our last slide, you can register for a free consult and the checklist at thinkcanna.com/contact. Again, a reminder that a summary and recording of the webinar will also be available on our website. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you all.